All right, good evening everybody. Today we're here to talk to you about 5 recommendations to take your message to the next level. My name is Amir and I'm here with my colleagues Christian, Veronica, and Aaron. So, first of all, before I get into the agenda, I just want to, you obviously noticed all our costumes. The reason why we've selected Mario is it's a fun way of tying into our more serious point. Mario is a classic story about a plumber that fights the forces of evil to save a lovely princess. So, and he uses his brother and his friends along the way to do that. It's a classic story, and it's one of the reasons why people remember it is that it's very simple and it ties to one of the common human emotions, you know, the fight between good and evil, and it's a fun, comical way of looking at that thing. So today we're going to tie that in and talk a little bit about how you can cover your message. So first of all, how you can make your message more memorable. The other things to consider is we're going to, as we get you more and more interested in this topic, we're going to talk about how you can use a learning quest that you have in front of you to get a better understanding of how to create that memorable message. Then we're going to talk about a few things that builds up to that. Structuring your message, recalling the message, we're going to watch a short video, and then we're going to roll into weighing up your medium options and of course improving your delivery. Lastly, we'll go through some questions and then test your knowledge on the presentation today. So first of all, before I keep going, it's really uncomfortable talking with this thing on, so with your permission I'm going to peel it off. Thank you. Before we keep going, I want to make sure everyone has the materials in front of them. So you should have 2 letter page pieces of paper upside down, right? Obviously not looking at them, although I see some of you already sneaky looks. And a pamphlet with the title of our presentation in front. Can you tell me if everyone has that? And if you don't, put your hand up so I can get it to you. Everyone have it? You only have one? Which one do you have? What does it say on the title? Alright, so learning quest is the other one. And do you have the pamphlet? Alright, who else?
I don't have the flyer.
Flyer? Okay. There you are.
Thank you.
Yep. Who else? Are we all good? Alright, great. So I'm going to hand it off to Aaron, who's going to cover our first topic.
Thank you, Amir. My name's Aaron. So level 1, why make your message memorable? Let's rephrase it. Why is it important that your audience doesn't forget your message? Right? Because we forget very quickly. Okay, a quick show of hands, how many people think that they could tell me all 10 key concepts that teams 1 and 2 brought up in their presentations last week? All 10. Now, I'm sure that we remember some of them, right? But all 10, that's difficult, right? Because we forget very easily and very quickly, right? Now, there are 2 main purposes behind a message. You're either trying to inform an audience, or you're trying to inspire action with them, right? Now, if your purpose is to inform your audience, and they forget your message, then they leave uninformed, and you fail, right? If your purpose is to inspire action, and they forget your message, then they're not going to take action, and so you fail. Right? Regardless of how good your message is or how important it is, if your audience forgets it, it's a waste. Right? So when do you think it's important to make sure your message is memorable? Ideally, all the time, right? But there are 2 key moments when it's critical. Right? The first one is when your message has complex themes with it. It's a difficult message. Not everybody's going to understand. The second one is when you expect your audience to be resistant to the message or distracted while you're giving it. Okay, so I want you guys to think of a teacher who's giving a lesson over a particularly difficult or boring chapter. And she fully expects halfway through that lecture, half the class is going to be mentally checked out. Right? They're going to be on their phones, talking to their neighbors, not paying attention. And so what a lot of teachers will do is they'll incorporate an activity over this chapter, or assign a project to the chapter, right? Or a lot of homework to the chapter. Get the class involved so that they're forced to pay attention. Right? But you have to do something in these scenarios. Right? So we're going to give you 3 general tips that you can use to make your message more memorable. Number 1 is going to be to make your message simple. You're far more likely to remember something simple than something complex, right? But not every message starts off simple. Going back to what Mukunda was talking about last week with Team 2, he talked about elevator speeches. He said keep them short and keep them relevant. Elevator speeches are inherently simple. But if you have to give a presentation over rocket science, suddenly that's not so simple. right? But I'm willing to bet that a rocket scientist could make it simple, could put it in layman's terms for all of us to understand. And so if you can't make your message simple, then you don't understand it well enough. And that's on you. That's something that you need to work on. You have possible research to do. You're trying to get somebody else to understand your message, and you don't have a very good understanding of it. Okay, so make your message simple. Clear and concise is how you make a message simple. And then it'll serve as a self-check for how well you understand your own message. Next, you want to make your message stand out. It's not that you're more likely to remember a message that's good, or you're more likely to remember a message that's bad. You're more likely to remember something that stands out, deviates from the norm. It's not normal, it's not common, it's not everyday, it's not average. So make your message above average. And you don't have to blow somebody's socks off to do this, right? If you're giving a presentation, have a cool opening or a cool ending, right? Or speak with confidence and passion. Or whenever you go in for an interview, firm handshake, eye contact, you're already above average. You're already more likely to be remembered. So make your message stand out. And then last, use an analogy or a story. Okay, this mainly works whenever you're doing complex materials with your message. Your message is difficult to understand, and so the idea behind an analogy is to take something the audience doesn't understand and relate it to something that they do understand, in hopes that now they understand both. Okay? And then a story, we're going to get into an activity in a second that'll demonstrate the power that a story can have in helping you retain information. Right, so what are some common mistakes that people make? What are things that people usually mess up? Right, the first one is going to come straight from your book. It's called a star moment, S-T-A-R, something they'll always remember. This goes back to making your message stand out, right? Do something they'll always remember. The problem is that people try too hard, right? This shouldn't be a surprise, but not every message is going to be something that you can make your audience always remember. Just inherently, they're not special enough, it's not an interesting enough message. And so if you try to force your audience to always remember something that they don't want to, it's going to backfire. You're going to come off as pretentious, obnoxious, annoying. To use an analogy, when you stand up to a plate, you don't always have to look for a home run. And simply put, even if you try to get a home run, you're not going to get one every single time, right? Sometimes you need to know when you just need to get the ball into play. Okay, so do not force star moments. Let them happen naturally, and you should focus on making your message above average. Okay, the next mistake, Dr. K had a brilliant personal example of it. Right, it's assuming too much of your audience, right? He was giving a speech to a Latin American audience, and he decided to use the Wizard of Oz story, unaware that his audience wasn't familiar with the Wizard of Oz. I'm sure that only made his message more confusing instead of less confusing. I just used a baseball analogy, assuming that everybody in this room is familiar with baseball and knows what a home run is. Right? Team 1's entire presentation last week was essentially know your audience, and one of their points was do not assume too much of them. It's dangerous. It can hurt your message just as much as it can help your message. Right? And then the last point is going to be a little bit more scientific than the other two. Psychology Today, which is a very popular science-based magazine, I'm sure some of you have heard of it, Psychology Today, has come out with several articles covering the phenomenon that you are more likely to believe a lie that is told to you with confidence than a truth told to you by someone who is anxious or nervous. And so if you want your audience to believe your message, accept it, retain it, and then remember it, you need to deliver it with confidence. Now we're going to do a quick learning quest. Okay, and hopefully at the end of this quest, it should demonstrate the power that a story can have in helping your audience retain information. And you should all have a learning quest sheet in front of you. It looks like this. For the sheet, all I want you to do right now is fold it in half over the dotted line so that you have a pre-story side and a post-story side. And then you can go ahead and put that sheet in front of you. We're not going to need it for right now. Has everybody got it folded? Okay. Right now, all I want you guys to do is put your eyes up here on this screen. We're going to show you guys 10 words, one after another, and all I want you to do is try to remember all 10. And that's it. Don't write them down. Just try to commit them to your short-term memory. Okay? Everybody ready?
Yes.
All right. Your first word is cart. Turtle. Mario. Golf club. Technically 2 words, but one object. Sky. Flag. Those are your 10 words. Now on the pre-story side of your sheet, try and write down as many of those 10 as you can remember. And we'll give you guys about 60 seconds to do that before we move on to part 2.
Practice with counting. All right, go to about 25 seconds. All right, about 10 more seconds. All right, put your pens down.
So real quick, did anybody get all 10? I think that they have all 10.
8.
8, that's not bad. That's actually above average. The average is going to be about 5 to 7. So if you got anywhere in there, that's pretty good. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do this activity again. Only this time, we're going to use all 10 words in a story and give you guys some images to go along with them. Okay, so go ahead and turn your sheet over so you can't see the words that you just wrote down. And then bring your eyes back to the screen. We're going to do all 10 words again, only this time they're going to be in a story. So I want you to visualize the story. And bear with me, I'm not the best storyteller. So I want you to imagine that you're driving down a road in a bright red cart. Right? But suddenly, a giant green turtle falls out of the sky and lands next to you in your cart. Startled, the turtle hops out of the cart and runs down the road, where he runs into Mario. Now, Mario's not very fond of turtles, so he's going to pull out his golf club, swing, and hit the turtle into the sky. Now, while soaring through the sky, the turtle looks off in the distance and sees a flag swaying in the breeze. Now, finally, the turtle falls, and he lands in a giant pizza that Bowser had just laid out for a picnic. Bowser comes up and breathes fire on the pizza, cooking it. And then the turtle and Bowser eat the pizza together. Then Bowser takes a look at the time, realizes it's getting rather late, and heads back into his castle for the day. So now that you have the story to go along with the 10 words, as well as some images, I'd like for you guys to go ahead and try and write down as many of these 10 words as you remember now. And we'll give you about another 30 to 60 seconds to do that.
Or about 15 seconds. All right, put your pens down, please.
All right, now I'll ask again, did anybody get all 10 this time? You think you have all 10? You want to tell me all 10?
I got
9? That's pretty good. What
You
is
can have a
9,
look
10?
up here if you want to check to see what you wrote.
Do you want to try and go off and list off all 10? That's perfect. Okay, so we actually had someone remember all 10. Now let me ask the question, how many people feel like they remember more words after the story than before the story?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for. Okay, perfect. Well, I hope this activity has demonstrated to you guys the power that including an accompanying story along with your message can have in helping your audience retain the information. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to my colleague Veronica, and she's going to talk to you guys about the importance of structuring your message.
Hello everyone, my name is Veronica Hensley, aka Princess Peach. And congratulations on getting that. You should have gotten coins. So I'm going to actually explain to you what level 2 takes you to. It takes you to the structure, the message. And why is it important to structure your message? Well, it helps you actually engage the audience. You want the audience to be engaged. And like Aaron said, you want your presentation to be memorable. It doesn't have to blow their socks off, but why waste people's time if you have a presentation and they don't know what your message was, they don't remember at the end of the day. If you want to inspire them or you want to tell them information that's vital, they're going to walk away and they're not going to know. So that is why it is important. It also, if you have a structured message and from the get-go it has structure, you follow the elements that I will tell you, then what ends up happening is the speaker is then confident. They know what they're going to say, everything flows correctly in the presentation, and the message is clear. You also want your audience, like I said, to recall the message, to remember it, to know what they have to go back and to do. What do you want them to do? Is it your employees? Do you have something that they need to go back and work on? Or do you want to tell people you have an iPhone and we need you to buy it because it's $1,000, right? You know, what is the message that you want to tell? Next, when is it appropriate? So if your audience is actually positive, they're going to take your message, they're going to be neutral about it, it's okay to go ahead and do the direct approach. Let them know what the message is about. They're going to be okay with it. But if you know you're going in and you have to tell everyone in the room that they're going to be laid off in a month, then you might want to try the indirect approach. You want to put all of the facts and evidence ahead of time to let them know what's going on. But I do caution you, if you decide to go with the indirect approach, don't go on too long. They already know something's coming down and all you're going to do is upset your audience more. So then the last piece of information for the when on structure your message is to consider how important your information is. Structuring it based on what is in your content is very vital. I will flip a page with my gloves on. So now that I've given you the why and the when, let's discuss the how. How do you actually structure this presentation? What do you do? Well, as you know, we've already learned that you first have to figure out what it is your audience, who are you speaking to? What's your audience? What's their background? What's their knowledge? Then we have to figure out what are we trying to tell them? What do we need to tell them? Well, so now we're going to get to the part of how do we tell them? And I want you to remember this, magic number 3. You want to chunk your information into 3s. You want to have a body, beg your pardon, opening, the body, and the conclusion. So then next we want to know which pattern do we take? Do we go ABC? Do we go chronologically? Do we go important to least important? Do we say the what, the so what, the now what? That is also important, and everything varies based on what your message is. What are you trying to say? It's not a one-size-fits-all. As you learned in Career Day, during their presentation, they did a great job of putting all of the bullets in 3s and giving you the information so that it was clear. It was structured. It was uniform. So if you're going to do a pattern, make sure that it's no more than 3 or 4. Keep it in 3s and 4s so that it's actually easy for the listener to follow. So then the next element of your presentation are pauses and transitions. Let the audience know that you're going to the next topic. And the best way to do this is to transition. So now, use words that will transition you to the next topic. Take pauses. There is nothing wrong with a pause in any presentation because sometimes you lose focus. And that pause gets you back on focus and they don't know that you just lost your train of thought. So, that takes us to the how structure. But now we're going to look at the common mistakes that happen. And I will say that I have been to a lot of presentations where people think they have to put every single piece of information on their PowerPoint, and people are left reading it. And we're not textual learners. If you're going to speak to an audience, have bullets that are simple. If you have a lot of writing on your PowerPoints, people are paying attention to the PowerPoint. They are not looking at you, they're not listening to you. There's no telling what you put on the PowerPoint and which parts are actually vital, but they're too busy reading it. They're not paying attention to you anymore. So make sure you keep it simple. If you're going to have a PowerPoint, do not put all of these bullets, 50 bullets up there with 5,000 words that someone has to read. That's not efficient. There's no reason to do that. And then make sure that you actually keep it brief and to the point. What are you trying to say? Don't say it 50 different ways. If you're trying to say we're laying you off, don't say it 50 different ways. Don't apologize 50 times. Keep it simple. Keep the message simple and moving along. And last, and the most important, make sure that you actually have correct information. Because there's nothing worse than presenting to people that you give them the wrong information. And with technology today, they pull out their smartphones and start making sure that what you just said was correct. So remember, structure is very, very, very important. And I will say that actually, according to Matt Abrams, who is from Stanford Graduate School of Business, if you have a structured message, it is 40% more likely that the people in your audience will remember that message than if it was unstructured. And so now, to take you to level 3, I'm going to hand this over to Christian, who will talk to you about recall the message.
Shy guy here. Hi guys. I haven't been talking for a while, but that's just my character. So level 3, recalling the message. Basically, how are you going to get your audience to be able to retain what you just taught them? You can teach basically anyone anything. For instance, Professor K can teach us calculus, but doesn't mean we're going to remember it. Doesn't mean we're going to be able to regurgitate it to them. So basically, level 3 dictates that there are multiple methods for people to be able to recall the core message or just anything in general. For instance, y'all are probably going to remember at least a small portion of our presentation because we make costumes. We're in disguise, basically. That's a good way to make it so your audience can recall what you're talking about, at least a general viewpoint. Let's go through the whys. First one, ensure your vital message is remembered. So far, so good, hopefully. 2, remember to focus your core message. So right now, the whole reason, as Amir spoke, we're all dressed up as Mario characters because we're trying to emphasize the story aspect. You have to think about different mnemonics. For instance, AIM. AIM is something from the text. It stands for audience, intent, and message, right? So you have to always keep AIM so you can recall and remember all these things about what you're trying to say. Another mnemonic that we learned, STAR. STAR is something that Aaron brought up. It's very important. It's something they will always remember. Yet again, I'm pretty sure y'all are always going to remember that we were that silly group that dressed up as Mario characters. 3, the why. Verifying the message is relevant. When you speak to different people, make sure, just like Aaron, Veronica, and Amir brought up earlier, make sure it relates to the audience. For instance, if y'all were all over the age of 60 or above, the likelihood of you knowing about, let's say, a brand new thing that happened on Twitter recently, you guys they're not going to remember that. If the age group is way lower, they're not going to remember about older things, you know? So just make it relevant. It always helps to know your audience ahead of time. Try to see their age group, where they come from, their place of origin, or just the culture of the times. Those are basic reasons as to why you should always try to recall a message, or at least incorporate something in your message that it can be remembered. When should you do this? Whenever you need to convince people to do action. Anytime you have a professor or a teacher, they usually do some form of example or presentation to say, this is a starting point, go do it this way, this is a basic rubric. And they say all these things such as, you're going to be graded on it. Remember, it's going to be on the test. Repetition. Stuff like that is always essential when you're doing presentations like this, so you're prepared. And another way to say recall the message is to help prepare the people you're talking to for the future, for the outcome, for the test, for whatever the presentation dictates. For instance, for us, it's to help you be able to give better presentations. Another when, delivering critical information. Let's say you're a boss and you have to give your workers, your employees a critical task. You gotta tell them, we need to raise profits by so-and-so. So you give them a task, you tell them what to do, and they have to remember and recall and think, why does he want us to do this? How should we do it? And usually the employee has to follow proper regulations. If I'm working for a gas station, I'm not going to go out of my workplace to try to do something radical to get more people to buy gas. I'm probably going to put signs up giving discounts or stuff of that matter. From this point, I'm going to go to how. How? Show them, don't tell them. Always essential to have examples, pictures, small videos, lots of hand gestures to grab people's attention. It's a lot simpler this way than just going up and giving people speeches. Because, for instance, I honestly don't recall giving a speech at any moment in time where lots of people all looked at me at the same time. For instance, let's say I was a valedictorian. Highly doubt over 500 students are going to be looking at me and remembering exactly what I said. Reinforce the message. Another key aspect of this is basically repetition. If it's a key term, repeat. Make sure it's important. Create a mnemonic. This was actually really easy since I already brought some up. I brought up AIM. I brought up STAR. Show of hands, does anybody know any other mnemonic? First one probably gets a Charlie point if you give me a mnemonic. Nobody? Anybody?
Smart, like PEMDAS?
PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Awesome. Perfect.
Woo!
Does anyone
You
know?
shouted one out too.
Smart goal.
Smart goal. Have y'all ever heard of Roy G. Give?
Yeah.
Right. All right. Can someone raise their hand and tell me what it is?
Red, orange, yellow. Sorry, raise their hand. Give it to them.
It's the rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green.
Exactly. There you go. That's another one. I personally have never heard that one until recently, and I thought that was genius. I'm like, Roy G. Give, what is that? And it goes through the entire colors of the rainbow. All right. Now, this isn't without some common mistakes. Fail to connect with your audience. If we didn't offer candy, probably no one would have given a response. That's give incentive. Either say we're going to quiz you later. Either say you should recall this. It's going to be important for work later. Give prizes. Just grab their attention. If it's just a little bit, it's just a little bit. If they don't really care for it, that's fine. Everyone else should probably have a fun time, winning those prizes. Overlook examples. That's another common mistake. Some people tend to not use examples at all. They just go up and they say, "This is the thing you need to learn. Remember it." Bam. Repetition. I honestly hate those kinds of teachers. I get those a lot. Where they don't give examples, they just say, do this, figure it out. When it's due, it's due. If you don't know what to do, it's not, you should have emailed me earlier or something like that, So those are common mistakes. Just always ask questions, for specific things. It really helps a lot to understand and be on the same page. Lastly, don't make the message too complex. Don't try to explain quantum physics. Unless you really know what you're talking about. And unless you have a proper example to let the people who don't understand it get it. Never try to overreach. If you can't explain it in a simpler term, try to go to the basics, the small building blocks to try to allow them to grasp it. For instance, mnemonics are a great way. The ones I brought up, the ones he brought up. PEMDAS. That's it. That's exactly what was taught to me and to a ton of other young students to learn the pathways for mathematics. And that's basically how you should recall your message and how you should convince other people to help and implement these strategic points to make your message more memorable. And going along with that, we're going to show you the best part of the presentation. It's the video, or Amir's going to show you.
Thanks. All right, so before we start, and this leads into the next topic that I'm going to cover, I just want you to pay attention to this message, and obviously it's going to be funny just ahead of time. This ties into the concept of medium of delivery. So I want you to think about, as you watch this, how the message is being delivered, what the message is, and what type of medium or methodology this person who was delivering the message used to deliver the message to the audience, all right? So we're ready?
Well, that was a wonderful coloring round. Okay, so the first word of the week is basket. Now, who wants to spell the word basket for a sucker? Timothy.
Basket. B-A-S-K-E-T. Basket.
Wonderful. Very good. There you go. Very, very good. Okay, the next word. Oh, I'm sorry, children. Just hold on for a moment. Children, I'm afraid I have some very bad news. One of your mothers was just killed in a car accident. Who wants to guess whose mother it was for a sucker? Huh? Anybody? Anyone? No? All right, look, I'll tell you what. Whoever can guess whose mom it was correctly can have anything you want out of the goodie basket. Huh? Timothy.
Scott's mom?
No, it wasn't Scott's mom, but good guess, though. Scott.
Philip's mom?
No, Philip doesn't have a mom anymore, remember? Scott.
TV's mom?
No. Do you kids need a hint?
Yeah.
Okay. She'd been drinking. Who said it first? Very good. Very good. All right, now.
Okay. So, I want to gauge your feedback. What did you ask? A very obvious question. What do you think of the medium and method that this teacher used to share this information?
Inappropriate.
What would have been a better way?
Sensitivity.
Well, if you were the teacher, how would you have delivered this message?
She could have just pulled that one student aside,
Once
like out in the
they're
hall, and let them know, instead of making it a whole class thing.
Anything else?
Is that something a teacher is supposed to do?
Well, I don't know about the mechanics of it, so I'm not a teacher. Maybe Dr. K can comment on that if someone shared that news with you about a member of your class. How would you handle that, Dr. K?
I have no idea.
All right.
I think it was handled perfectly.
Okay, that's good. I'd never want to be in your class.
For sensitive situations like that, I do know that a school counselor would come, they knock, and they would bring the teacher outside, and
Yeah.
they would wait until there was something busy going on, and they would bring the teacher to pull the student aside once other students are busy.
Maybe make
They
sure the
won't ask
student also gets
questions.
home, doesn't have to go back to class, that kind of thing.
Right.
Anyway, so look, it was a comical way of talking about what I'm about to talk to you about, and that's medium. So when you're considering your presentations, one of the most important things you need to think about is your medium and what your options are. First, you need to decide, first and foremost, if your audience is open to a particular medium. For example, we're using PowerPoint today and some visuals. This might be appropriate perhaps for this audience, but sometimes audiences are not open to PowerPoints. They might absorb that information you need, maybe from a video or a pamphlet or a letter. It doesn't matter, but knowing your audience, and you'll hear this theme throughout, is really important. So you need to first decide, is my audience open to a presentation? And as you do that, you need to then identify that suitable medium. As I just said, you can have videos. There's also mediums too online, like Facebook or Google or Skype, or a variety of other methods that you can share the message you want to get across to make it memorable. Then the other thing to consider as you're thinking about your mediums, how much prep time do you have? For example, this PowerPoint, believe it or not, actually took several hours. And for those of you that already started and have already delivered your PowerPoints, you know how much work actually goes into getting it ready, polishing it up, and making sure that it comes across really well, right? So if you don't have the time, think about what are your options based on the prep time you have, right? Then, let's think about when, right? So when would you start considering your medium options? Well, first and foremost, logically, during your preparation phase, right? Do you want to ask a question?
I was thinking of 10 minutes.
Oh, okay, thank you. And very, very actually timely on that, when you have a time constraint, right? So if you have a time constraint, you need to get your message across quickly, you need to think about what mediums you have as you deliver it, right? And lastly, and probably most importantly, is when you're handling sensitive content, this is actually key in the corporate world for those of you that are already working. So if you're sharing some information, make sure as you research your audience and who you're delivering it to, also think about, even if they're right audience, is it right for them to see that info? And if it's not, you need to seek some advice, whether it's from legal or the people that actually authored that content that you're about to share, right? Is it appropriate for them to see? And if it's not, you could get yourself or your organization into a lot of trouble. I myself, when I present information, I have to vet it sometimes by legal, right? Before I share it with a customer to make sure it's not inappropriate for them to see, right? So how would you go about it? How would you weigh up your options? Well, one of the easiest ways, first look at past examples if there are any. Typically, for a lot of topics, it's probably already been written about or presented at some point in time. So you want to look at past examples to see what other people used and what are some best practices. The other is discuss this again with trusted advisors, whether it's legal, the authors of the content, your media relations team, anyone in your organization that could assist you in that prep, right? And leverage all your mediums available to you. As you consider, sometimes it's a combination. Like today you see that we're not just presenting to you through some costumes and a PowerPoint, but we're also using some pamphlets, etc. to reinforce the message that we're sharing with you today. So it's that combination that sometimes is the winning combination that gets the message across. What are some of the common mistakes when you're considering your mediums? Well, first of all, failing to consider all your options. Think about it the other way. If you're not considering all your options, you might have missed something that would have gotten the message across better. Overestimating your presentation skills. All of us have some polishing to do, I imagine, if you're really honest, right? Me included. How do you get your message across? And that comes across in your prep. How much prep have you done? Did you prepare enough? Did you practice enough? Did you present it in front of a small audience first, perhaps? Did you do enough dry runs of your presentation to get it ready? A common mistake is when you haven't done enough prep. And lastly, as you're considering all your mediums, don't overdo it. Don't do every single medium. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes one is enough. All right? So I want to talk about something that will tie all the messages my friends here shared with you, which is really improving your delivery. I want to focus that a little bit more. This is the last level, really, at the very top. When you're talking, you need to make sure you have your audience's attention. Their attention is bound to vary at times. So get them engaged. Ask them a question. Pause, just to make sure they're listening. And as you maintain their attention, you want to make sure that your audience is walking away with a key message you're trying to share. In this case, how to make messages memorable when you share them. Always focus on improving your delivery. Focus on what else you could be doing so that your audience sees that. And that comes through feedback and prep, right? A lot of the prep you do, a lot of the practice you do, if we did this presentation 10 times, I can guarantee